To be completely honest, I don't know if I would have been a therapist if I knew these things. Hey everyone, it's your girl Charnel, aka ohsolimitless. Welcome back to my channel. I've honestly been thinking a lot about the role that I'm in today as a therapist and what it took for me to get to this position today. I've been thinking about things that I honestly wish I knew sooner, what would have been helpful for me in terms of my career journey, and so I thought it would be helpful for me to share with you some things that I personally wish I knew before becoming a therapist. The first thing that comes to mind for me is the time and financial sacrifice and commitment it requires for you to become a fully licensed therapist. Now, this is something I did not know or really consider when I was choosing this career path, because if you watch my video where I discuss how to become a therapist, I discuss like you take at least minimum 6 years to do your undergraduate degree and then your master's degree to become a therapist. In addition to that, we have to ensure that we're doing clinical hours. So it could be 1,000 to 1,500 clinical hours, direct client hours. And then we have to do hours, like hundreds of hours of clinical supervision to ensure that we are capable of practicing being a therapist on our own, independently of anyone else. And so this is a huge time commitment because completing thousands of direct client hours, of course, is a lot of time. And also it's a huge financial commitment because outside of grad school, you would have to pay for a clinical supervisor out of pocket. And that could range from literally like $100 to $180 per hour. And you might have to get like 150 clinical supervision hours. So this is a huge financial commitment. And even when you are able to practice independently, it is always encouraged that you still continue with clinical supervision because there's always so much more to learn and gain from having that clinical support. So becoming a fully licensed therapist, there's a huge time commitment. In addition to that, there's a huge financial commitment that I feel that no one really talks about before choosing this career path. That is something that I feel like if I knew, I may have chosen a completely different trajectory because again, you're still always forking out money. And this actually leads into my second point. You're always forking out money to become a better therapist, but at the same time, if you choose to go into an agency or a public sector agency where you're providing therapeutic services, you're not making that much money. And so the fact that you're not making much money, you're possibly making like $35,000 a year, $35,000 to like, let's say $65,000 on the good side a year, and you're still having to pay out of pocket to become licensed or to ensure that you're staying on top of your licensure. It's just a lot to be asked of you for a specific career, right? So I'm not saying that this field is not rewarding, but there is a huge time and financial commitment to become a therapist and to ensure that your license is maintained. In addition to that actual financial commitment, you have to register with a regulatory board depending on where you live, and that is a yearly fee that you have to pay in addition as well. So two things. There's the time and financial commitment, and the second thing is that the salary honestly is not the best. Now, this obviously can change if you decide to have multiple sources of income, or if you decide, like myself, to have a private practice. It's possible to make 6 figures running a private practice and that's it. However, if you're choosing to work in an agency and your goal is to be a therapist or a social worker, but not necessarily have your own business or private practice, it's going to be hard to make a very decent living off of the income as a therapist. So those are two important things that I would love for you to factor in your decision of if you want to be a therapist or not. I remember being in grad school, and one of my professors was just like, hey, you're not choosing this career field if you want to make money. And it's just like, bro, why are we finding this out in grad school when I already signed up, paid my student fees? Like, why don't we have this information beforehand, you know? So something to consider. If you're going to private practice, again, your route might be very different, or if you plan on having multiple streams of income, your income again will be very different. But if you just want to do agency work and that's it, because again, burnout is a very real thing in our field, then I would possibly consider if you are okay with living with that minimal income as opposed to being able to make more money in a different field. The next thing that I really wish I knew was that therapy does not look the same way that it looks on TV. And what really psyched me out was I was the only Black young female in my grad program. Everyone else in my program, they were either white, male or females who were either in their second career, they were already established, they had children, like they were in a very different phase of life than I was. Like I just came out of undergrad, going into grad school, and everyone else was super established, and I was just like, how do I measure up to these individuals? I don't look like them, I don't speak like them, I don't dress like them, I don't have experience like them, so how am I going to fit in? Where do I fit in as a therapist? Because I don't look like what a therapist looks like, apparently. And boy, was I wrong. There are so many individuals who benefit from my service as a young Black woman. There are so many individuals who benefit from me being my authentic self, being able to not be scared to speak to someone because I'm more relatable. They're able to connect with me, and we're able to just have a different connection that they may have not been able to get from all of my colleagues that were doing their grad program with me. So I really wish earlier on that I didn't doubt myself as much as I did, given that I didn't look or present like everyone else in my program, and that I really just honed in and owned the fact that I was young, Black, and a female, and had my own things to offer my clients. That is super important. So don't psych yourself out. You don't necessarily need to have so many years of experience. You don't necessarily need to look a certain way. You don't need to speak a certain way. You're able to adjust and be your authentic self in that therapeutic space. Okay, so don't be psyched out by what you see. Don't be psyched out by you not necessarily matching the stereotypical way of being a therapist, because you bring your own individuality to that therapeutic room, and that is all that matters. The next thing I wish I knew was that learning never ends. Now, to be honest, I felt like, hey, I'm a lifelong learner. I love to learn. Learning never ends is like, cool, I'm good with that, but no. Learning really, really never ends. Like as therapists, we're always reading, we're always looking at possible research depending on the type of therapist that you're in. You're always getting clinical supervision, you're always connecting with other therapists, you're always encountering people that have very different traumatic experiences or different life experiences, and you're gonna have to learn how to adjust and maneuver with them on the spot. And so there's always new research coming out. You're always learning. And so even though we discuss like burnout because we're having so much one-to-one time with our clients, sometimes we can also get burnout because outside of our clinical work with our clients, we're still learning about it. We're still trying to psychoanalyze people sometimes, or like we can have a lot of crossover from our personal life into our therapeutic world. And that's because we're always just learning about people and things around us. So I want you to be cognizant that if you are an individual who doesn't necessarily want to come home after work and possibly continue reading or possibly learn more about trauma, if you want to leave work at work and not have to do continued learning, then therapy, being a therapist, is possibly not the route for you. I am interested to know, if you are currently a therapist, what you wish you knew before becoming a therapist, and if you're planning on becoming a therapist, is any of this information new to you, or is this stuff that you kind of already knew? Comment below and let me know. The next thing that I honestly wish I knew before becoming a therapist was that I don't need to know everything. If I knew this and believed this, I would not have put so much pressure on myself to be perfect. And without having so much pressure to be perfect, I think sessions would have gone better, especially at the beginning. I feel like I wouldn't have doubted myself so much, and I would have been able to have a more fluid experience and transition to being a therapist, and possibly to even opening up my private practice sooner rather than later. It's okay for us to be human, not have all the answers, let our clients know, hey, we could come back with some information, because again, we are human. There are so many different factors that show up in that therapeutic room that's not going to allow you to know every single thing. And as I mentioned, as therapists, we're always learning. So as much reading as you may do in grad school, as many things as you may take away from grad school or from different experiences, year 5 to year 10, there's still going to be different things that you're learning. There's different things that you may have not known before that you could apply and learn in year 10 in comparison to year 5. So don't put the pressure on yourself to know everything, because as therapists, we don't know everything, and that's okay. Now, there's one more thing that I want to share with y'all, and for me, I knew this, and this is something that I considered, but I think it's important for me to share with y'all because not everyone considers this. Now, if your goal is to be a therapist in private practice, you will need some level of business acumen, okay? And not everyone becomes a therapist because they want to go in private practice. However, I still do think it's important for everyone to open themselves up to that option because we never really know what it's like being a therapist and experiencing burnout until we're in that agency position and we're a therapist experiencing burnout, right? And so the only option outside of that is possibly going into a group practice or a private practice. So business acumen includes things such as like basic marketing skills, understanding customer service, understanding some ethical portions behind having your own practice. And so I think that's super important for y'all to consider and is of course something, a skill and knowledge base that can be acquired over time. But if your end goal is to have a private practice, I encourage y'all to look also at the business side of things because that can be a very supportive tool in making your trajectory of becoming a therapist easier and more helpful and successful. Now, my goal with making this video was not to discourage anyone from choosing this career path. I just feel like it's important for us to have some level of transparency so we are all aware of what we're getting into and what it's really like to be a therapist. It is so important for us to have these kind of conversations because, again, it could be a very life-changing decision that we make about the career that we choose for ourselves. Now, this career honestly has been so rewarding. I absolutely love my role as a therapist. I would not trade the position that I'm in to do any other career. However, there are some things that, again, if I knew, my trajectory may have looked very different. I could have done things sooner as opposed to later. And I could have been smarter about how I navigated this space as a therapist. So I hope this video was insightful for y'all. If you have any questions or if there's some things that you never considered or some things that I may have missed, please comment below. I love engaging with y'all and I feel like we learn from each other in the comment section. Comment below if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, make sure you subscribe and click that notification bell. And of course, as always, I will see y'all in my next video. Bye.